Blair here. I'm here to do a video today on shadow work and journals, and I thought that I'd actually bring my big box of journals out and show you guys just what I use, or what I have used in the past. But I'll just talk a little bit about how journals have really made an impact in my life, and how I do very much view them as a daily need, a daily practice, a daily go-to place. They are just there all the time next to me. I keep them around me all the time because as a person who is a writer of fiction and non-fiction, but also someone who is very intellectual in their capacity of thinking, I always am inside my head. I'm always analysing and working things out, and have done for a very long time. Journals for me are the essential tool in shadow work, and I'm just going to clarify that before I probably found out really what shadow was in terms of what most people perceive it as, probably around January last year. I had a vague understanding of what it was from my own perspective. I kind of always knew that I was doing this kind of work anyway, especially when I'd be going to counselling and therapy and all different kinds of workshops to try and work on the stuff that was coming up, and the focus was on kind of removing that, and things would keep coming up because I would just sort of be working to just get rid of the entire thing without actually really looking at what it was. So that really shifted when I started writing more and journaling more and on a daily basis, sometimes for hours and hours during the day, sometimes it was just an hour. And even to this day, sometimes for me it is, I sit down and I write 20 pages, other times I write half a page, and I really incorporate the tools of tarot and other books and research into that as well, and even some fiction books as well. I'm currently reading The Ancient Future right now, a book that I've been meaning to read for 6 years, and I kind of finally am understanding what it's about, and it's sort of setting off my own triggers and things that I need to understand and uncover as well about my own spiritual thoughts and practices. So I'm just going to show you a few things and read out a few passages of some older journals to sort of give you an idea of where I was when I started this process, again without really knowing what it was called, and a few ways that I have used journals in the past to do the work as well, so different kinds of journals. So I thought I'd start with the first journal that I actually have kept. Now, I did have boxes and boxes of them from my childhood, and I mean literally boxes of them. I would pretty much fill one up at least every couple of days because I had so much going on in my family and outside life that I just needed somewhere to go. And I also had stories and tarot readings and stuff in it, much like my journals today. So this is the first one that I kept because my mother, probably around 13, 14, she told me that if I wanted to really unblock my unconscious mind and sort of free all the energy and stuff that was inside of me, I needed to get rid of my journals because they were a reminder of what that was, pretty much. And being who I was at the time, I listened to my mother and I threw them all out. And the biggest lesson for me was to keep journals and keep a hold of these, because no matter how old you are or where you're at life, you can always look back on them and see the progress that you've made, but also uncover anything else that may be sort of stagnant and you're unsure of what it's all about. So this is one of my first journals, and I'm going to try and make this video as quick as possible, so it's not like 40 minutes, but let's see if that works. So this is my first journal, and really I started it around the same time that I found Doreen Virtue and her angels, and sort of really got back into connecting with my spirituality, so around 2010. And I was just going through it very quickly just to try and find a passage to read where I can sort of give you an idea about where I was at that age. And I was 20 in 2010? Yeah, 20. So and at the time I was living with my partner in a share house with a bunch of very, very unconscious, hard-hitting men, very aggressive, misogynistic men and things like that. So it was kind of a reflection of what I'd grown up with, and apart from my partner who was not like that. So I was doing a lot of deep questioning, so I'm just going to read you a passage. The deeper I lose myself and who I'm not, I lose what I am and what I thought I was. If I have not been wanted, where do I fit in? I know some who've had it harder, but it is my life and I feel lost. I'm greedy, I'm a liar, a cheater, and I continue to follow the path of dishonesty and lack of gratitude for the things that I have in my life. I want more, and I'm not willing to work for it, and I'm taking on more personalities as each day progresses. I lack motivation and the ability to smile, to make the best out of negativity and live in the fear of who I am. I want to be someone different. So for me back then, being around that environment and having that reflection of myself, I can see now as an adult, as I'm 25 and someone who is working on these things, that at the time I identified with the parts of those men that were being reflected back at me. A lot of them were aggressive and lying and cheating and doing that kind of stuff, and it brought up a lot of things in me when I was looking at it to sort of realise, yes, I was, because back in then I was. I didn't know that, I didn't really know myself. I was very lost and disconnected from my consciousness as well. So I kind of brought a lot of unconscious activity into my life. And back then I was very much, I could not speak up. I lied about a lot of things. I did cheat because I was trying to figure out where I sat in the spectrum of my sexuality and identity and relationships, which is now, I kind of have a solid idea where I am with that, but still it's constantly changing. So it's really good for me to look back on that passage and see that, you know, I still identify with some of those key issues sometimes, and I do find them in other people, and I think it's important to reread through that sort of stuff as well, to sort of get an understanding of where you sit with those words in itself. And that's a really great way to do shadow work. Another one of my journaling expeditions was I kept a learning journal where I would try and write something that I'd learned, or a topic that I'd learned or researched or whatever, every day. And this was in 2013, so 3 years later. And I think I only made it up to June. But one passage really stood out when I was flicking through, and I thought that I would read this out too, because it's very applicable to what I'm doing now and what I'm really uncovering about myself in this present moment and in my journals now about how I view myself. So the title is Mindfucks, Inconsistency and Anger. One thing I cannot stand in anyone is mindfucks, busyness, bossiness and inconsistent ideas and opinions. So just briefly, just after saying that, this has been a very integral part of my awakening. All those things that I did not like about this certain person that was coming into my life and really pushing me really, really hard to make some changes and understand what I really, really wanted in life. All those parts that I disliked about her and found angered, and I go on to talk about projection as well. There is a parts of myself that I have long worked on to actually come to terms with the fact that I am bossy at times. I can be very dogmatic at times, especially when I'm really trying to hone in on something or make a process available to someone. Not so much in my career work, more so in my personal relationships, which does also filter through sometimes. You know, this is my shadow side of myself. These are the things that I'm insecure about. I'm insecure sometimes that I am bossy, and something that has come up a lot in the past, probably, I'll probably say a year, has been the fact that I am inconsistent with my ideas and opinions, or my commitments, and this is something I'm working on now. So it's interesting again to see that even like 2 years ago, I was in that place. I was in that place of judging somebody and not wanting to look at my shit, But at the same time, I feel like at least I was getting it down. I was getting down the thoughts, and I kind of was understanding what was happening with that person, which for me was a much greater awareness than in 2010. And I think this is 2010 as well. I don't think I dated this one, but it was basically this journal was, I'm going to say 2010 or 2009, which was really when I started opening myself up to being a polyamorous person. So polyamorous being that I have multiple partners at many times, or none at all, or whatever that dynamic is. But I was also breaking free from the mold of this monogamy idea and coming out of sort of very violent relationships that I'd integrated into my life, and also participated in different scenes and all that sort of stuff. So this journal is really about me tying that all together, but in a fictional sense. I often went into different stories, poems, I guess novels, any kind of form of writing that wasn't actually really talking about myself. I went into it to explore it in a very safe way, because the things that I really wanted to explore in my life and really, push my boundaries and get myself to the edge of these things to understand them, they kept bringing up these situations that were dangerous and unhealthy and toxic, because I didn't quite understand how to communicate better, what was projection, what people were putting onto me, what was my own idea, what fears I had, because I'd already just suppressed all those fears. I was powering through and wanting to be a much more stronger person, and at this period of time I was also going through that stage where I felt like I was immortal, and that everything, could just slide off my back and I'd be okay, and if I could just sort of push myself, I'd realise what everything meant, and it would all make sense after a while. So a lot of this is about dark things. A lot of it was exploring like the idea of death, torture, erotic stuff, erotic scenes, and a lot of it, when I look back on it, was very male driven, which doesn't surprise me, considering that, the journal in 2010, I was around a lot of males who were projecting that stuff too, or showing these parts of myself too. And I'm still to this day very in my masculine energy, and I could also see that I had this really hard time connecting with my feminine, but also connecting with females in general. I was that person, I was that female who was a misogynist. I'd write these characters, or these men characters, who would torture women and do bad things to them. And it was just me trying to just push on through and understand this part of myself that had grown from being around these people, their ideas, their beliefs, their conditioning, especially in a time in my life where I was very sensitive and a sponge. I just took in other people's advice because I was very quick to move out of home and escape things, and I was looking for an escape. And I kind of idolized a lot of the men that came into my life during that period of time. So this journal really does serve as a gateway for me to see how much I've grown from that person, how much I hated myself back then. I hated my feminine parts. Around that period of time too, I really was struggling with my identity and wanting to be a male rather than a female. Whereas now I can really, I still do struggle with the masculine at times, because it is such a prominent thing, and I do have PCOS, which does mean that my hormones are strongly testosterone higher than estrogen, and that does play an effect. But it's also about realizing that, back then I had such a hatred for women, but I also had a hatred for men too, and what they would do to people. And I can accept that now. I can accept that person as me back then and my experiences, and back then I couldn't. I just denied it. I denied that I was scared and had all these negative feelings. I just thought it was normal, and that was the way I was going to live the rest of my life. And my relationship with women was poor, and I continued to bring into my life these relationships with women who were insecure and unhinged and sort of dealing with the same things, whether it was against women or men. And it's only until probably, again, maybe 2.5 years ago that I really started working on this stuff, and it was through these journals, looking through these journals, to realise just what the shit was, that I was able to really start from somewhere, as well as what was coming up. So those are 3 of the sort of older journals, in the time of my, I guess you can say, in the time of my darkness. But at the same time, it was also a beautiful time too. I met some fantastic people. I went through extreme changes in perception, and I built up a lot of trauma as well that I am still working on, but I'm happy to be working on it. I'm really happy to be working with it. So nowadays, I still use journals as a way to tap into the shadow, and all these things that are, you know, they're not there in the way that they used to be, but they do come up in different areas and different times when they're triggered through other people or my thoughts or what I'm reading or what I'm feeling. The fundamental lessons that I've been needing to learn my whole life are still there. Some things I've really come to terms with and accepted and really embraced, and they've kind of healed and sort of grown and helped me grow as a stronger person, especially when it comes to communication and respect for females and males. I now do have such a love for females, and I'm part of circles, and I am working on a novel and a fiction book that really focuses on feminine energy, and I am immersed in it. I love it. But I know I still have my issues with males, and still have a long way to go with working for that. So that's my shadow stuff, and I'm really happy to do that through the journal. So part of me doing that was finding different ways I could use the journals in shadow work. So one of my top issues with myself, and has been for a long time, is when I was younger, I was very outgoing, very outspoken, just wild, free, blabbermouth, you could not shut me up. I experienced a time when I was 16 where, for a period of 6 months, I was pretty much condoned, or condemned, I guess you could say, to being silent, to being conditioned in an army-style situation where there was threats being made, and I just did not feel safe to speak my mind. Communication was being blocked off from all avenues. And, you know, that journey was so important for me. I bless that person every day. I bless their issues and their projections and whatever they were trying to put onto me, because it made me such a strong person at the end of the day. And it took me a long while through shadow work and journaling. And during that period of time, I could not journal. I had my notebooks taken away from me. I never had space or time to actually look inside. I was always under strict control and watch. And from that experience, I learned the importance of being able to communicate effectively and honestly about pretty much everything and living an authentic life. And from that, that's where my business was born, the Authentic Angel Bliss. My purpose for now, and I know this is my path, is helping people to communicate effectively and truthfully in an authentic way through their light and shadow side. So I tried to find ways that I could better communicate. One of the ways I use my shadow side work and my journaling now is whenever, say, for instance, this is my Mercury retrograde. So if you're familiar with Mercury retrogrades, it is a time when communication and energy is a little bit chaotic and can get fucked up, to be honest. I've experienced it in awareness, I think, 3 or 4 times now, and every time I come into it welcoming whatever gifts brings me, because I know it's going to bring up some stuff. So I have a journal specifically for Mercury retrograde because I wanted to figure out during that period of time what things were coming up revolving communication, and how breakdowns and re-establishment and sort of reworking foundations was an important part of my way to connect with myself, but also to connect with others. And I cannot rave enough about the benefits of having a journal during these kinds of periods of time if you're really into astrology and universal energies and whatnot. And so I started it, and I love it. I started working with it. I only use this journal during Mercury retrograde, and there's another one coming up very soon. And this really is my way of connecting with the way that I communicate with myself and the world. And I guess you can say every journal that I have is that is the purpose of going into the self and really uncovering the self and really digging deep into both recesses and both halves of myself, both parts of my psyche, you know, the subconscious and the subconscious, and even I guess you could say the unconscious as well, bringing that up. But I do have specific journals for certain times when I know that there are issues coming up that need my attention and focus, and I go more deeply into those sort of areas during these times. So whenever I'm doing Mercury retrograde work, I kind of work with the with tarot, and also read a lot of other people's opinions about what this time is going to be about as well, because I think that helps me to sort of figure out where I fit in that spectrum of where I want to go and what I want my intent to be during that period of time. And I would say too that when you're doing shadow work with journaling, it does help to have an intent. And I know many people have discussed shadow work and journaling as well, and having the intent. I think it does help to have an intent, even if it is just for a journal. Now, intent by someone you want to write to. A lot of the times when I was growing up, my intent was to connect with Anne Frank, because I truly honoured her perspective that the truth needed to come out, no matter what it was, and that there was beauty in this world even in its ugliness. And I think that she tapped into the shadow side as well. And so I found that inspiration in her, and my intent would be sharing my journey with her. And while I'd read her book, I'd kind of get stuff back filtered through to me too. So it was kind of like mirroring each other's experience, because at the time when I was writing it, I felt like I was trapped in a world where you know, I was coming out. I was also discovering that I did have psychic abilities. I went through trauma as well, and family disintegration and stuff like that, and I locked myself in a room a lot of the time. And I did feel like I had so much to tell, and I wanted to tell my story, and I didn't want to filter it out at any possible given time. I wanted to really get into what was going around me, and I felt that, you know, by connecting with Anne, I was able to do that. And sometimes that does help when you're doing shadow work, that you are connecting with your consciousness, and if it does help, you can reach out to guides and goddesses. I mean, I know right now that I'm working with Demeter, and I address my journaling to Demeter. When I really want to sort of tap into something I'm wanting to uncover, I address it to Demeter, and that helps me sort of sink into that session as well, feeling like I am supported by the universe, as opposed to being supported by someone else who has their own agenda as well. And again, you know, I have journals where I've dreamed. I used to keep this as my dream journal. Now I just dump it all in everywhere else. So my journals are pretty much like my book of shadows and my shadow work combined, and my light work as well. So I remember this journal helped me discover a very important aspect of myself in regards to women, and how I had relationships with women since I was very young. I'm talking adults and children, when I was about 8. So this journal really helped me uncover my relationships with women, my relationships in comparison to my mother as well, who at the time had her own issues going on, and with her mother as well, as most of us have experienced. And it was through a series of dreams that I was able to really tap into something that had been locked up for a very, very long time, and it really uncovered my relationship in regards to myself, my body, how I saw other people, how I saw other women, and how I had disconnected my love for and appreciation for the divine feminine in, you know, the personification of humans and sort of as well. And I cannot thank these pages enough. I cannot thank the pages enough for being able to go into that place and use this as a way to wade through the fog and wade through the shit and really get nitty gritty with what actually happened to me and why it happened and my part in it too. Like, there were times, even when I was 8, that I knew that I was making a decision, that I knew that I had a choice to step away or to step up or to change things or think a different way. But I was very independent in that way. I just knew that I was just going to have to go with the flow. I just had to trust that whatever was happening for a reason. I always did. And again, even though I've had countless experience where the same issue has played out time and time again until very recently, where I've uncovered why that is and how that all plays a part in my life now, it was a time of really understanding that and knowing that I lived it and it was a gift. You know, I don't think I'd ever take that back. I don't think I'd ever take anything back that I've learned, especially through uncovering the shadow work. And that's something that I would like to mention too, because I do know that a lot of shit comes up when you start journaling. Without even knowing what I was doing, every time I'd ask a question, more stuff would come up. More stuff. And I'd have to face it or deny it. And there are still times now where I say to myself, at this present moment, I'm not ready to deal with that right now. So, sorry, the mailman was outside. I think he left something and I was a bit confused. So, I had to figure out, you know, how can I do this? So I'm looking at this. How can I do this in a way that is going to allow me to bring stuff up and not suppress it? And I found that just by opening the page and being able to give myself permission, I guess you can say, to bring up whatever needs to be brought up and really go deep and show up and be whatever there, and to know that after I did that, that I would actually have a support network. And I think this is one other important thing about shadow work. While it is a self-exploration and a definite need to go inside, I would recommend, much like when you're tarot journaling, that you do have a support network. I mean, you don't have to go and tell that person what you're doing or why you're doing it, but sometimes it's just enough to purge all this shit and then be able to just hug somebody and be with somebody and connect with somebody. And maybe you might not need to do that for weeks or days, or maybe you might discover that the person that has brought up all these triggers, you know, even though it's a gift what they're bringing up, and you can see that where you've projected and where they've projected onto you, that you need a break from that person. Or you may discover that you need to hug that person or be closer to them because you kind of have this understanding now. And that in itself is beautiful. I mean, I know with my own mother, I've had so many experiences over the past year by just addressing things in my journals and my shadow sessions that have shifted things without me even having to say anything, and have made our relationship a lot stronger. And it made me a lot stronger too, in being able to really address things that happened in the past that I want to talk about, and also things that are sort of triggering me in the present moment as well. So I hope that my long-winded rambling talk about shadow work and journaling has sort of given you some ideas about where you could go or what you could do with them. Really, you're not limited to anything when it comes to what kind of work goes in your journaling. And I think what I'm going to do is also make a video later on about sort of tips that you can start with, or areas that you can start with, because I find it sometimes really hard. I did at the start when I was sort of consciously becoming aware of what shadow work is, to kind of think of things to bring up. I mean, I knew there was tons of shit that I needed to deal with. I was just trying to pick which one to work with first. And nowadays I just sort of, it just comes because I'm so open and receptive to it most of the time that I kind of just get insight anyway, and I know what I want to work on during that day, but sometimes I don't. So there are some ways around that which I'd like to share. Hopefully you haven't been too traumatized by my sharing, but I love sharing. I think it's really important for me, again, to tell you guys this and to share it, and to give you a perspective on how you can really integrate this journaling system, or any system of journaling, into your shadow work and daily practice, and light work too. And I love to use my journal to brainstorm and mind map and make ideas up and write stories and sonnets and poetry of love, dedication and devotion. So if you have not got a journal, I say girls and boys and lovely men and women, go get yourself a journal, because it is just fantastic. Okay, I'm going to head off. I think I've been distracted enough by the mailman, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.